Hi, this is Jill. Welcome to the Life After podcast, where we talk about moving from surviving to thriving. This podcast is for anyone who wants to learn, grow, to get tips and tricks about how to inspire you to become the person you want to be and get clarity about exactly what you want in life. This is also the place to be if you want to be lifted up and encouraged to go out and do great work in the world. What has happened in your past does not have to define who you are today or who you become in the future. And in fact, what has happened to you in the past should, can, and will shape who you want to be. This podcast is also about bringing people together. It's about connecting all of you, helping you identify where you are in your process. What do you need to feel more engaged and alive in your life? More connected to the people in your circle? This is a community of those who are looking to improve our world in the way that is most meaningful to them. Why is this important? Because how we show up really matters. Bringing more service, kindness, and love into the world is vital right now. The secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. Socrates. Change brings opportunity. Nido R Qubein. Change is the only constant in life. One's ability to adapt to those changes will determine your success in life. Benjamin Franklin. Remember that the only constant in life is change. Buddha. Great things never come from your comfort zone. Unknown. In this episode, we're going to talk about change. And since we're going to talk about change, I'm doing this episode a little differently. Normally, I spend a fair bit of time writing and researching each episode. I know that may make them a little dry to some of you. I do this so that I'm bringing you the most thorough and up-to-date information that I can in every single episode. I know that so many podcasts are more casual and are really just conversational. As I do more speaking, I want to strengthen that muscle of being able to not have to rely on more scripted content. And I really want to practice having less structure. It also means that while I've spent a lot of time thinking about this episode, I haven't spent so much time writing it. I hope that my willingness to change and grow and take a chance and, well, maybe fall flat on my face here will inspire you to try something new in your life. So we're going to try it and see how it goes. The first thing that I want to say in this episode is don't be afraid to change. As with all of those quotes, the thing of it is, change is constantly happening in our lives. It's the one thing that we can be absolutely sure of. Change is constantly happening. Whether it's the weather, goodness gracious, here in the Pacific Northwest, it was 80 degrees yesterday, and today it poured down rain in the middle of the day. So whether it's the weather, whether it's, our moods, whether it's anything going on around us, change is constantly happening. And so our ability to accept and acknowledge that and not struggle against it really gives us the capacity to lean in and take those steps when we want to see something change in our lives. Now, one of the things that really can cause us some struggle is not when we're afraid to change, but when we don't want something to change. And in those moments, I really invite you to look at why you don't want something to change. There are definitely those situations. I have one out of the house and one that's gonna be out of the house here, in the next year or two, depending upon the choices that get made for school. And it's hard to have an empty nest, right? And so sometimes there are changes in life that we maybe don't want to have happen. If you're going through a divorce, or maybe that's a change that you don't want to have happen. There are definitely changes in life. Maybe if you're a young adult and you are being faced with the reality of having to start adulting, there are definitely times in our lives where the changes that are happening that we don't have any control over, maybe even something medical or that's health related, and we just don't want to do it. We don't want to face it. We don't want to deal with it. We don't want it to happen. And I really invite you in those moments to consider that, those changes often are going to happen anyway. And our ability to adapt and to pivot and to be flexible ultimately give us more opportunity to ultimately decide what it's going to look like on the other end of that change than if we spend all of our time and energy fighting it and go through the process kicking and screaming. Because in all of those examples I gave you, that change is going to happen anyway. And if we go through it angry and frustrated and unwilling to move through it, unwilling to accept it, we're still going to experience the change. We're just going to come out on the other side really unprepared with where we are and what the next steps in our lives are. I had a coworker and he used to say that I had this incredible capacity to pivot, right? And I think that that's because I've had so many things in my life that I've had to so many changes I've gone through in my life, so many things willingly in some cases, and many that haven't been my choice. And I think I'm not sure if I've ever mentioned this here in the podcast. The kids bought me a saying a couple of years ago when we moved up here that said, every end, she sees every ending as a new beginning. And I really do. I really, really wholeheartedly believe that every ending is a new beginning in our lives. And I invite you to consider, if you're moving through a change, to open up to the possibility of what this change is going to bring to you, and to not be afraid of that change. In the long run, it will make it easier for you. The next point I wanted to touch on, for those of you out there that are kind of like me, who want to accomplish so many things. I have so many things I want to do in life, and sometimes life feels so short. So I'm constantly striving to be efficient and get a lot done and have a really big list. And what that drives me to do is to develop and grow, and as you all know, I'm a total I don't know how to say this. I'm a total nerd when it comes to reading. I'm constantly reading. And so this drive that I feel, this ambition to accomplish so many things, to be out in the world and serving and helping, this purpose I have for helping others, creates a a, 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 a part of that comes out of that, is this secondary piece where I'm forced to always be changing and developing and expanding and growing so that I can accomplish all the things that I want to do. So for those of you out there that this resonates with. I've picked up a couple of books in the last few weeks. One of them was a very quick read that I went through and really enjoyed, called The 12-Week Year by Brian Moran and Michael Lennington. And the second that I haven't quite finished yet, but is hugely popular, most of you have probably already heard of it, is Atomic Habits by James Clear. And the thing that I really like about both of these books is it really sets for us in different ways how we can use change to our advantage, how we can look at life differently, particularly the 12-week year, how we can really decide and use change to our advantage, and from that change create whatever we want, frankly. So it's really, to me, being a book nerd and finding gems like this, the 12-week year, and then implementing the suggestions in it, creating targets for ourselves, really staying focused, and making those little changes in our lives that can have huge impact is so exciting to me. And I wanted to share that with you because if you're like me and you have so much that you want to do in life, regardless if you're 20 or 40 or 80, and you still have so much you want to accomplish in life, there are tools out there to help us learn how to make changes in our lives that help us to grow, expand, develop, whatever word feels best to you, and make those changes that make us, again, whatever feels good to you, makes you more effective, makes you, um, whether it's you're reading Simon Sinek and you're leaning into your why, and then the how comes, whether it's like the 12-week year here, where you're leaning into having more capacity to get things done. But there are so many ways that we have access to information through books or podcasts or school, whether it be formal education or just courses. And I take I'm always seems to be taking a new course, and so I've got, actually, that's going to be one of the next things I talk about. We have so much access in this day and age to finding ways that we can lean into change that helps us become the people we want to be and allows us to do all those things we want to do in life. So that makes me so excited, and I feel so passionate about our ability and our capacity to use change to be the people we want to be, to show up in the way we want to show up, to provide for others in our lives, whether that be our immediate family, our friends, our close circle, and how that ripples out, our work, and how that ripples out into the bigger world. So I invite you to consider the resources that you have in your life or that you have access to that can speak to really leaning into the changes that you want to make and enhancing your ability to make those changes. The next point that I was going to make is, as I just mentioned, I started with a group earlier this year. I think it was actually the beginning of this year. Her name is Denise Duffield Thomas, and she starts, or she's actually in Australia. And she does a group called Money Boot Camp, which is really interesting. She helps people work through their money sabotages, basically. And it's a fantastic book. She's got a couple of books if you want to start there and getting to know her. And she's all over social media, Denise Duffield Thomas. So if you want to kind of get to know her there. The piece that I want to talk about now, as it relates specifically to change, is she talks again and again about decluttering our lives. And this, I've always been kind of a minimalist. I've never been one to have a lot of stuff and want to hold on to stuff. And yet I found it really fascinating how she uses decluttering as it relates to when we have money sabotages. I'm going to expand that idea out to say that when we are going through a change, when we want to make some kind of transition in our life, when we are working through something, decluttering our lives, whether it be physical declutter, whether it be cleaning up our email inboxes, whether it be anything electronic, I just recently deleted a whole bunch of apps off my phone. There is such a freedom in declutter. Again, whether it's emotional, mental, electronic, physical, whatever kind of declutter you do, that just opens up possibilities for any kind of change you want to make in your life. So I invite you to play with that idea of declutter and maybe think about the ways that declutter might work in your life, especially if, I mentioned earlier about how when we're struggling through a change, maybe we're going through a breakup or a divorce. Maybe we've got kids leaving. Maybe we are in a position where we have to go out and adult in the world. Maybe there's a health challenge, particularly if you're going through a change that's really challenging you, that's got some frustration or some worry or some anxiety or some stress. I really, really invite you to consider this concept of decluttering. Again, it doesn't matter what kind of decluttering it is, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, electronic. Try some decluttering, practice decluttering, and just feel how that declutter lifts the weight off, gives you some freedom and space, and see how it gives you the opportunity to kind of shift and allows you to move through your challenge and into that change more smoothly. So practice that. I would love to hear anybody that tries that. Please let me know how it goes for you, because I'd really love to hear how you feel about that and get some feedback. I find it works amazingly well. And so I'd really, really love to hear how you feel like it works. All right. The last thing we're going to talk about in this episode, change so often feels completely and totally overwhelming, which is why we avoid it, right? Because it's scary and it's overwhelming and we don't want to do it. And who wants to lean into something that we don't know what it's going to happen? We don't know what's on the other side. We don't know where it's going to take us. So of course, absolutely, of course, I get why you might not want to lean into change. I totally get it. So my recommendation is that when change feels overwhelming, when you're thinking to yourself, I don't want to lean into this. This is stupid. This is an obstacle I don't want to have to deal with. Go back to the basics. Go back to those things that we talk about again and again and again. Where's your mindset? How are you feeling about your mindset? And do you need to shift it? Right? There are so many. This podcast is designed to give you, in almost every episode, hopefully, ideas for how to shift your mindset, whether it be through music, through writing, through movement. There are always easy, quick ways, even if it's just temporarily, to shift your mindset. So go back to the basics. Try to shift your mindset. Remember that taking baby steps right? I often wish in the podcast I had the capacity to have the visuals for you. I'm such a visual learner, which is always why I kind of find it ironic that I do a podcast, right? But I have this visual of a ladder. And so imagine a ladder. If the ladder had, you know, 24 inches between each rung, well, that would just be silly. No one would be able to climb that ladder, right? You'd have to be 6'2" to climb that ladder. Let's make it even more ridiculous. Let's imagine that the rungs were 36 inches apart. It would be ridiculous. 3 feet between rungs, right? The nature of when we're going through change, particularly when it's overwhelming, is to take baby steps. And here's the other thing that's so beautiful about that and so fantastic. You don't have to know all the steps. You don't have to know every single step in the path, down the whole path. All you have to know is the very next step. And then you get to look around, decide how it felt, figure out what'd you learn, and take the next baby step. Right? That's how we move through things. That's how change happens. Is we have a very clear idea of what we want. That's another piece about going back to the basics. If you're feeling overwhelmed, re-engage with what you want. What do you want? More than anything, you got to start with what do you want? Become re-engaged with that. Fall in love with whatever that idea, concept, desire for that is for yourself. What do you want? And it can be a thing or it can be an idea. Are you in a breakup? Are you having a divorce? Are you getting out of a really terrible relationship with somebody? Do you want peace and calm and quiet? Are you having trouble with your health and you're being forced to go through this change and you just want to be pain free and you want to move through it? You got an adult, so you want to feel safe. You want to feel like you can do this, right? Identify what you want, shift your mindset, focus on that thing that you want. Remember, focus, our brains get us what we want. So we got to focus on that thing. Always use that positive language. So these are the basic things we want to do when we're feeling overwhelmed, particularly when change is happening around us. I am always here to help. Please reach out to me if you'd like some additional support, would like me to come and speak to your organization or school, would like to be a guest on the show. There's a link in the show notes for how to reach me, or go to my website at locatecoaching.com. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to today's episode on change. Remember, change doesn't have to be scary. It's happening around us all the time. Lean into it. Go back to the basics if you need to. Use the resources you've got. And I promise you, leaning in and doing those things actually make change a little bit easier. I appreciate you sharing these episodes. This podcast is a powerful resource for anyone that's looking to make changes in their lives. So please help me grow by sharing, liking, and subscribing. There'll be new episodes on the second and fourth Wednesday every month. I promise that every episode I'm going to show up and help support you in your individual journey. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you soon.